Hi everyone, this is Samya and welcome to my YouTube channel. So today in this video, we are going to talk about how I started thinking in English effortlessly. Because this is a question many people ask, and there were times when I used to ask this question as well, that how am I supposed to think in English, or how can I start thinking in English? Well, I believe thinking in English or thinking in that particular language which you are about to speak is very, very important, because if we don't think in that particular language, or let's say in English, then we are tend to translate everything from our mother tongue to English, which may not help us to sound natural and fluent English speaker. So before I share my steps which help me to think in English effortlessly, let me tell you something, that thinking in English or thinking in any particular language is not an overnight process. It may take months to directly think in English rather than first of all think in your mother tongue and then translate everything from your mother tongue to English. So let me share with you my journey, that how I started thinking in English. So I still remember when I first get to know that in order to speak English fluently, you will have to start with thinking. Because if you don't think in English, then you may not sound natural or fluent English speaker, or you will always get stuck in that translation mode. So once I get to know about it, I was literally shocked, because I had already been following multiple steps such as writing, listening, watching, reading, speaking, focusing on my vocabulary, and there were multiple steps which I had already been following, and I did not want to focus on this part as well. So as long as I get to know that okay, I have to think in English as well, or I will have to focus on this part, I just told this to myself that I am not going to think in English, or I am not going to focus on this part of English, because I was already busy. I had multiple things to get done. I was already exhausted because of the process. But I still remember a few months later, I think around 2 to 3 months later, I realized that I am able to think in English effortlessly. I was not being conscious about it, but still I was able to think in English. So I was completely shocked. But I just looked back at my journey, that what exactly I did which helped me to think in English. So I got to know that there were many steps which I had been following unconsciously, which helped me to get rid of this translation between two languages from my mother tongue to English. And so let me share with you what exactly I did and how I started thinking in English effortlessly without being conscious or without thinking twice about it. The first thing I did is something which anyone can do, and it is consuming a lot of content in English language. And by saying consuming content, I mean be it reading, listening, or watching, whatever suits you or whatever seems comfortable to you. So I still remember I was consuming a lot of content in English language, because this is something I have realized, that the more you inculcate these steps into your daily life, or the more you adapt these steps into your daily routine, the more comfortable you will become to think in English, because English is going in your mind almost everywhere. Recently, I uploaded a video where I mentioned about how I studied English 6 hours for 30 days, and it was not the only challenge which I followed. There were days when I studied English for 8 hours, for 5 hours, for 7 hours. Although I was not studying continuously, but there's one thing for sure, that I was consuming a lot of content. So that I started thinking in English, because English was always in my mind. Whenever I was having my meal, something was going in my mind in English. Even while I was sleeping, I was thinking in English, like I was dreaming in English. If I was going somewhere, or if I'm alone or not doing anything, I was thinking in English, because I inculcated these steps into my daily routine as much as I could. So this is something I would tell you, that if you really want to think in English effortlessly, try to consume a lot of content in English, because it will make you so comfortable with it that you will be able to think in English, and along with that you can also improve your spoken English, because you can always think in English or you can always speak whatever you want. The next thing I did was narrating any story in my mind. And by saying narrating any story, I mean I used to pick up any topic, or let's say if I have watched any video or if I have read something which sound impressive or which actually taught me something. So I started summarizing it in my own words, but I did it in my mind. So let's say if I have watched a video about how to stop procrastination. So I started with very simple sentences like, there was a girl who talked about how to stop procrastinating, and I would go further like, what are the things I learned from this video, or do I actually procrastinate, or how it affects my daily life, or how often do I procrastinate, or if I do procrastinate, then how can I avoid procrastination. So I would ask multiple questions to myself, but I was doing everything in my mind. So this is a step which anyone can follow effortlessly, because if you are not doing anything, or if you are sitting somewhere, or if you are outside, like if you are in public, then you can start narrating any story to yourself, which will also help you to think in English without thinking about it. So there's another step which I followed, talking to myself but in my mind. Well, I have this crazy habit because usually I prefer solitude. So whenever I go outside or if I am sitting alone, then I would constantly think something. Or if I'm on the way to my university, then I would start thinking about multiple things. So if I went to college or if I looked around myself, I would start thinking about many things, because there are many things around me which give me context to think. So if I would look at any group and I would start thinking about them, well, usually I don't prefer thinking about people. I would think about object, or if something is looking really nice, or if I want to compliment something, then I used to do these things. I still do them because I got accustomed of these things, and it has become my daily habit. Sometimes I just appreciate my hard work. Sometimes I console to myself. Sometimes I whine to myself. Sometimes I just scold myself. There are many things I do every single day, because it actually gives me context to think. Because oftentimes we feel that, okay, I have to speak, I have to think, I have to write, but I don't know what to do, I don't know what to think, I don't know what to write or speak. So when you look around yourself, you can find many objects which can help you to understand what you can talk about. So this is a very good step I have been following for a very long time. There's another steps I follow, but this is something I always hated, because who wants to be an overthinker? But I don't want to consider myself as an overthinker, because I feel I am a pro overthinker whose mind is filled with unnecessary questions, unnecessary stuff, and there are many thoughts, ideas, suggestions which often pop up in my mind, which sometimes make me feel crazy. Because obviously it's not a good habit, or I don't call it a habit because I don't know, it's natural. So sometimes I try to take advantage of these things, because I know I cannot stop my thought process. I cannot stop myself to think about something. So whenever I start thinking everything in my mother tongue, I remind myself that instead of thinking about these things in my mother tongue, I want to think them in English. So that's how I focus on thinking in English. So for example, if I am washing dishes, or many thoughts came up in my mind. So what exactly I do, I would shift that language from my mother tongue to English. So like I am getting my things done, but at the same time I am thinking in English. Or if I am walking on the road, I would think. So before shooting this video, I was thinking as well. So like I was thinking about, I have not been uploaded video for a very long time. So what exactly I'm doing? So there were many questions I was thinking, although I know that these are just an overthinking, because it's never going to give me any kind of benefit. So I try to take advantage of these things, and I try to shift that change from my mother tongue to English. So now you may think that sometimes whenever I start thinking in English, I always get back to my mother tongue, or I always start thinking in my mother tongue. So let me tell you one thing, that it happens with almost everybody. I often feel that like I have been thinking in English for a very long time, still I start thinking in my mother tongue, because that is really comfortable. It is comfortable for all of us. So whenever you feel that you get back to your mother tongue, or you started thinking in your mother tongue, remind yourself that you have to think in English. So that's how you can get rid of this problem. So here are few steps I shared, but in conclusion I would say only one thing, that if these steps are not helping you, then follow just one step, which is consume as much content as you can in English. Because the more you inculcate these steps, the more content you will consume, the more comfortable it will become for you to think in English. And I think 2 or 3 months later you will realize that you started thinking in English effortlessly without being conscious about it. So I hope my steps actually will help you to start thinking in English, or you could learn at least something from this video. So that's all I have to say. So if you like this video, then please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.